Back to Kalamazoo, 1884. By 1883, the largest village in the nation was experiencing growing pains. Village government was no longer capable of meeting the needs of the growing population of 16,000. There were demands for sewers, paved streets, clean water, and lighting. Because of these needs, village presidents...
I've had people comment on my videos asking about narrative. Why do I always use the word narrative? What is the narrative? This short clip is essentially historical narrative that gets handed down to us in official form. We get the deification of the founding members of these cities. We get a timeline, a short chronology of events, and my suggestion, as always with these, is that much of this has been manufactured by these gentlemen's clubs, and I have wholeheartedly removed my trust from these narratives, and I suggest you do the same. But that's up to you. We're going to be taking a look at Kalamazoo.
City government occupied the top floor, and 3 fire engines and horses were housed on the ground floor.
And as we make our way back to the Great Lakes area, to the state of Michigan, we find ourselves looking at Kalamazoo, and many of the largest cities in the area we have covered here on this channel. And we can see here that Kalamazoo, Michigan, not a large city by any means in our modern day 70,000 people. At the turn of the 20th century, we are looking at about 25,000 citizens. And like any other location, if you look at the brief history provided to you on Wikipedia, I use Wikipedia not as a reference, but as a showpiece for the narrative. You're going to get a very, very similar timeline as you get in many other places in North America. Although I do think this is worth a mention, we have a chief of the Potawatomi, Mach-E-B Nashiwish. I thought that was interesting. Let's get a little more narrative before we get to the slideshow. We're 1829, we have a Titus Bronson from Connecticut being the first one to build a cabin. It's always build a cabin. Eventually they get to the 3-4 story brick structures, but it always starts with a cabin. He platted the town in 1831. And it kind of pains me to read much more of the narrative. This gets very, very silly, as it often does. And 30 years on from the building of that first cabin, we have this type of architecture. These multi-storied structures side by side, looking like they've been there for a lot longer than 30 years, I will tell you. And as I often mention, the purpose of these videos is to provide an archive of these old structures from the past, to put them all in one place for you. So I'm not trying to give you a history lesson, I'm not trying to give you narrative. We are definitely questioning the narrative here on this channel. This is supposedly the old opera house, Academy of Music, it says here, and we'll see that labeled as an opera house a little bit later on as we move forward. We get an armory, and what we like to look for in the architecture is the decorative aspect of from those early days, from those pre-power tool days, from those early power tool days. This is the asylum, a depiction of the asylum in 1861. We are told first opened in 1859. You have to really ask yourself, why were there that many crazy people, and did they need such a fancy place to house these insane people from the time? We've talked about this a lot on the channel as well, how the narrative, the old world inheritors needed somewhere to put people that would question the new narrative that they were trying to lay out. And I do suspect that that's what was going on with a lot of these structures. These structures were founded, they were not built for this purpose, and you have these types of nefarious characters inheriting these structures and housing anybody that does not go along with the new storyline, the new history that is being laid out for the people. And really, you just have to think about this logically. Does it make sense that they would be so concerned about the mental health of the society and the people that they would construct these buildings for that purpose? And we know that the ugly history of many of these asylums speaks to a much more nefarious purpose for these. And the architecture itself is actually quite spectacular. Very difficult to believe that anything like this was being put together. Again, this would have been 1859 they were building this. Very, very early on in the narrative. This is where you expect the wooden structures, the log cabin type structures, to be a part of it. This is the water tower. Apparently it was built in 1895. We are told again, why the flare? Why do you have to make this look so fancy? Is it just the people at the time had that much more class, that much more taste? Or are we inheriting a previous civilization's architecture? And again, you'll see depictions of fountains, really not making any sense for mid-1800s Michigan. And so many of these Greco-Roman style structures, again, not fitting their purpose, supposedly looking like a temple of some sort. This is the Burdick. This is also 1860, and history tells us that there's 6,000 people living in Kalamazoo at that time, yet you can see again the age and how large these structures are. And so this is the interior look at the Burdick Arcade, and it does get burned down, as so many of these do. 1909 it looks like, and then they build a new one, and of course it'll be advertised as fireproof, as they often do. The fire narrative, a very prominent part of the inheriting and repurposing of these locations. And I have had the Native American question put to me every so often as well. And what I often suggest is that that there's nobody who really has a firm grasp on their own history. We know that even by the accounts of the official narrative that the people that were here in North America were genocided and put onto reservations, and they lost their language and were re-educated. And I suggest that this happened to all people, and to try and grasp at a history that we really have no concept of and has been taken from us, I think is we have nothing to hang our hat on. Let's say we can't really anchor to anything. And I will say that we know the World's Fairs, which were a large part of setting the new narrative, were portraying the native people of the continent and all the continents as being very primitive. So I think we really have to step back from that and set our assumptions aside on that. There's much more going on here than what we've been told. So I don't think it's a good idea to try to pick and choose what we think might be more accurate. I think it's very hazy and very difficult to trust any of it. And of course, as I often say, if you're seeing the postcard, it means that I had trouble finding these in photograph form. We have the Kalamazoo College, or Western Michigan College, I believe. a number of fantastic Greco-Roman looking structures. Again, not making sense why in the late 1800s that you would be building in such a manner. We see this type of architecture is very prominent across the continent, and not syncing with the historical narrative we are given of the 1800s. It's a major problem with this, with our historical timeline, is that it doesn't make sense with what we're seeing. Many of us are getting into, sorry, we get the cat here. Many of us are getting into this field of research, and we're in awe of what we're seeing with our eyes, and we are recognizing that it doesn't match what we have been taught about history. It doesn't match the school book version of history. It doesn't match the Hollywood version of history. So there's a technology that has been erased. There's a knowledge level, a knowledge and understanding of ourselves that has been taken away from us, obscured from our vision, from our existence, from our reality. And the purpose of my videos is to present to you these examples of what I consider to be old world architecture, whether they be in their original form or repurposed or modified. And the hope is that you consider the historical narrative that you know of the past and possibly reconsider it after seeing this architecture. This is Central High School. This is a very interesting piece of tech up here. Certainly not just a weather vane. Very interesting. And this is also to the columns. This is quite a unique feature here. Very frivolous. If you saw this in the modern day, people would really question why you would have to build this portion of the school. And so many churches as well. We have talked a lot about the churches and the repurposing of these buildings by the religious orders. The architecture itself, the organs, the pipe organs in the churches, the cymatic patterns in the windows. Some people have hypothesized that the glass was added later. There are a lot of ways you can go with this stuff. And of course, this is what we do to these structures. This is the First Baptist Church in Kalamazoo. This is what it once looked like, and this is what we do to them. And often the excuse is given, if you're a historical apologist, the excuse is given is that the tower was unstable and it had to be taken down for the safety of the people. But we know that there's much more going on here, and that they're trying to erase the evidence that there was this previous civilization that utilized the architecture, utilized the energy of the ether through the architecture. That is the theory surrounding much of this old world research. And of course, if we no longer have access to this ether, or if we are made to believe it's not real, which has happened, then we will lean on new sources of energy. And that's where the whole petrochemical thing comes into play and takes over our transportation, takes over our health industry, and of course the same names always pop up. And it really is not such a mystery to understand that some of these robber barons, for lack of a better term, have never been on the side of the people, and in fact have been actively working against the best interests of the people. So this is a call to take back that knowledge of self, to explore the knowledge of self through this old world architecture. That's how I like to do it on this channel. And there are other researchers in this field that do it through other means as well, but I encourage you to question what you have been told about the past, about anything really, and explore other options. We are living in the information age, and there is a lot of content available to you out there. Certainly much of that content won't be available on YouTube, and you may have to go to other sources to find what you're looking for, but it's there, and you may just have to work a little bit harder to find it. This is all just parts of the City Hall, the Art Deco City Hall. That period of time, very strange too, the 20s and 30s, particularly the Art Deco period. Many of these Art Deco style buildings built in a very short period of time. Something not right there to me as I look at it. I suspect World War II was not, as we have been told, but in fact some sort of I don't know how to say it, a schism in the timeline occurred with World War II, and we're looking back. We may be looking back at a different timeline than the one we are on right now, and that's getting, for some people, maybe a little bit too metaphysical, but there are just too many anomalies to try to be able to fit them into the timeline that we have been taught. This is the Corporation Hall. It showed up in that intro, again built in the 1860s. We get to the county courthouse, similar narrative. We have an original county courthouse, 1837 to 1885, and then we have the subsequent courthouse, which has all but disappeared as well, looking like a magnificent multi-storied, multi-domed structure with this fantastic statue on top. All par for the course. I encourage you to investigate your local county courthouse. First I'll show this. This is the ladies' library. It still stands. I just have a shot of the brickwork. This, again, giving you an idea of how pristine the exterior finish is on these structures. Really does stand the test of time. It has to be grossly neglected for it to start falling apart, really. We have an Elks Temple. We have two Elks Temples. Elks being one of the gentlemen's organizations that are upholding the new narrative. Also an interesting photo of the American Hotel. Was it always the American Hotel? This looks like it was an afterthought. Nice looking structure. Again, very early days, and that is some serious posing going on there. That is the ultimate pose. I love it. And interesting too, these cobbles. Are they being removed from the streets? Okay, the central fire station. Not looking like much here, but this picture gives you a better idea of how intricate the brickwork and ornamentation is on this fabulous looking structure. The First National Bank. A savings bank. So many of these old structures repurposed as banks. Another old world looking building, still in the modern day, so you can still see a lot of these, despite the fact that many of them no longer stand. We do get these wonderful examples of architecture. And you can just ask anyone in the industry what it would take to duplicate a house such as this in the modern day. Ask them how long it would take, what the costing would be. You'll find out in a hurry how difficult it would be to construct these. Looking at some more of the college buildings from 1894. Another fantastic example of that pristine brickwork with the exterior ornamentation. A little bit plain looking, this one, but you still get this on top. And many of these style structures, I think, that used to have something like this, that dome cupola has been removed over time, and now you get that plain roof where once upon a time there was much more going on. This looking like a very bustling older city than what we're told. Again, you can see the detail here as we zoom in a bit. 1866, a school, a Union school, again with that cupola on top. Again, 1866, you can see the lower story below the main entrance. So that whole mud flood narrative enters the picture, and you have 3 stories. Way too much for that early time period. 1866,000 people living in Kalamazoo. One of these spectacular early libraries Kalamazoo had. That fantastic looking stonework, the very impractical nature of the construction itself. So many of these brick structures, brick ornamented structures. This might be a Lutheran church. If anyone knows, correct me if I'm wrong. You can see the streetcar tracks in here. You can see the lower level, all classic indications. There's something almost reminding me of Spain here with the, I suppose, the railings. Not quite. Maybe, yeah, something, maybe that Moorish style architecture. And what do you expect really from a small city like Kalamazoo? Do you really expect the manpower to be there? Are we to attribute all of this to the German immigrants? And really it seems to be wherever I look, you're finding this architecture everywhere. So often I'll get someone commenting local about how special their city is and how they were just whatever the hub of some sort of industry, and they had all these special builders immigrate there, and that's the reason why they have all those magnificent looking structures. Here you can see this is 7 of Kalamazoo's 40 churches. 40 churches. What a lot of these people don't realize is, I mean, I have mentioned it several times, but I've done over 100 videos of different locations in North America, and you're not special. I mean, you are special. They're all special. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not trying to call down your town. What I'm trying to say is that this was everywhere. So this is the Lawrence Chapin Palace. Apparently still stands, and there's a look at that. 1872. They like to slap the date on there. We don't do that anymore. You wonder why, right? Slap the date on the front of the building. Like you're trying to pound that into somebody's head. There's that library again. Here's another look at it. There's our modern structures right there. But look at this thing. Look how the lower stone tapers outward. It's fantastic. Again, you can ask anyone who's in the biz what it would take to build this library in the modern day. I suspect you'd get laughed at, but in 1893, everybody was doing it everywhere. Wonderful looking structure. Alright, we'll move on to the Masonic Temple. You had to have somewhere to do your secret stuff, and they had this one. And they also had the Elks as well. And I suspect more that for some reason those don't easily come up in a search. So you have to ask yourself why. Secrets again, I guess. Secrets. This is the Nazareth Mother House. So if I go back here, this is Nazareth College. And the different buildings there. And this is the interior of the Mother House. And look at the ceiling. If you can pick up the coffered ceiling and the detail there. Again, remember this is all in Kalamazoo, a city that had 25,000 people at the turn of the century. Yet they were able to knock out all this architecture. This is the Mother House, the exterior of the Mother House there. So this is on the interior of that same building here. They loved those 3-story columns, didn't they? The acanthus leaf. If you are familiar with Hidden Truth, the YouTube channel, he gets into the old world from a biblical perspective and hypothesizes that the acanthus leaf is a symbol coming from the millennial reign of Christ having been here for 1,000 years already, and that the old world buildings are left over to us from the millennial reign. Yeah, so they're calling this the Opera House here, and I think we saw that at the beginning as the Academy of Music. So I think it's the same structure. It looks to me to be the same structure. So many opera houses in small town America as well. You're seeing this circled here as the opera house, this structure here as well. Very congested looking streets going on here. You have the horse-drawn streetcars. Of course, again, that narrative, as I was mentioned, the streetcars were first invented before electricity, and once electricity came on, they were able to replace the horses. But the infrastructure already being there. Not making a lot of sense again. This Upjohn character has a bit of history in Kalamazoo. Upjohn's pills. You know anything more about the Upjohn's friable pills? Throw that in the comments down below. I'd love to hear more. We get to the post office. Of course, long gone. Couldn't find a lot on this, but having that same look that we expect to see after having seen things like the library. Of course you're going to put a turret on the corner. So much easier to build that way rather than just coming square across. It's all an indication of large amount of people, large amount of skill, and really no thought at all to how much things cost to construct. What a magnificent looking church, the Presbyterian Church, we are told. This could easily be somewhere in England or France, but we're getting this in Kalamazoo, Michigan. This is apparently a previous Presbyterian church, and this is the interior of the church. Kind of confusing, difficult to find anything more on that narrative. And again, the massive pipe organ. We talked about that as part of the healing frequencies of the old world. We're coming to the end of the file here on Kalamazoo. There's that wonderful mother house on the Nazareth College again. This is the Lovell Street School. Detention center up in the tower, as they like to do. Portage Street School. Vine Street, I think we saw this in the beginning as well. And apologies, the file is a little bit mixed up in a few spots. Here is the post office once again. This is a much better look at the post office. So we're going to take a closer look and really take in the lower windows. Look in the detail above the arches here. And a wonderful looking little dome on top with some tech at the middle. Even this piece right here is very interesting. You can just imagine it being a receiver of some sort of energy, electricity, whatever you want to call it. Even these nodes, very interesting, very unique. And coming to the end of the file, the State Theater. We have an interior shot of that State Theater. And it still stands, and this is just giving you an idea of some of the decoration on the front of the building. A little bit more of that State Theater for you. You can see a little bit more of the interior, how ornate that is. Fantastic looking light fixtures. So much higher quality back then. And a lot of this old world quality continued to be a part of who we are and how we built, but I think it was something that over time has sort of faded away from us, or has been taken from us by design, by design through the New World gents. Let's say this is the Temple Panay, and we saw this one earlier. What does that say? 1891. We have a train station, Michigan Central Depot. Still stands apparently. Again, you can see that quality of architecture. And this is just a quick look at the inside of that area. Very, very interesting looking, unique. And as we come to the YMCA, the final building in this slideshow, I am curious as to what your thoughts are on the old world. Are we closer to it or further away from it than than you previously thought. I think this is a memory. I think this is all a memory that we are going back to, and we have to correct some of the inaccuracies in our historical narrative. So I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thanks for watching. This has been an old world exploration. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and comment. I believe we are in the process of remembering who we really are and casting off the shackles of illusion. Until next time.